Doom Eternal is one of the best first-person shooters of all time. I love the shit out of this game. It is certainly my 2020 game of the year. Everyone knows how tight and fluid the combat is, how well optimized the game is, aside from some minor exceptions, and how perfectly it mixes the beauty of its environments with the brutality of its combat. The Ancient Gods Part 1 sought to amplify the everything that made Doom Eternal so great. They doubled down on the difficulty, doubled down on the platforming, and certainly doubled down on the music. This DLC has to be one of the most intense, batshit crazy experiences of my life. The DLC puts all the skills that I learned from the base game to the test. I played the DLC on Nightmare difficulty and beat it the day it came out. Being an experienced player, the DLC took me roughly 5 hours to beat, and I barely scraped through. It got me thinking, id, what the hell were you thinking making this standalone? I think I have some leverage when talking about the difficulty in the DLC, considering I have more than 300 hours on Doom Eternal, with the majority of those hours being spent playing on Nightmare difficulty. I've seen a bunch of players in the Doom community constantly shitting on other bad players and reviewers, especially IGN. I know Hugo Martin said that Nightmare is the way to play Doom Eternal, but the developers made difficulty options available because Nightmare isn't the only way to play Doom Eternal. The Doom community houses some of the kindest, most helpful players that want to see more people playing this masterpiece. Like everyone else, I have my fun teasing games journalists, but to the very small subsection of people who unironically scoff at those who can't beat the game on Nightmare, grow up. If the devs wanted people to only play on Nightmare, they wouldn't have made the difficulty adjustable. Moving back to the Ancient Gods, this DLC is hard, dude. I've played through it roughly 4 times, and every time I've gotten my ass kicked. Damn it. Damn it. God damn it! I think the main argument against my point is that new players will likely not play on Nightmare, and I fully concede because that isn't my point. Let's review the IGN video and look at some of the mistakes that they made, and let's keep in mind the reviewer says that they've played the base game. Bruh. Even after playing the base game, we see some very jarring mistakes. Now, how can we expect someone who's completely new to fully understand the mechanics of the game? I did a small experiment and had my little brother play the first level of the DLC on Hurt Me Plenty. My brother has plenty of experience with FPS games. He has several hours on TF2, Left 4 Dead 2, Payday 2, wow that's a lot of 2s, and the first half of Doom Eternal. He also plays many of these games on the harder difficulties. Needless to say, he's no slouch when it comes to FPS games. What you're seeing is his gameplay, and I think it somewhat speaks for itself. There were several points where he got messed up, and I think he died about 5 or 6 times throughout his playthrough. My brother told me that the DLC was fun and that he had a good time, but it was a terrible introduction. I think it was a huge mistake to make the Ancient Gods a standalone expansion. This DLC was not meant to give players a first impression of the series, so it makes no sense to let people jump into the DLC without playing the base game. Honestly, I think the difficulty alone may put off some people from further exploring the series, and I think that's a gigantic mistake on id Software's part. Doom Eternal has a ton of mechanics too. I'll often overlook or just straight up forget a weapon mod, one of my grenades, or even my blood punch. Is that my fault as a player? Yes. But my point is that everyone can get overwhelmed by the sheer amount of mechanics provided, even experienced players. Here's a short list of the things you need to keep track of: health, armor, ammo, blood punch cooldown, dash refresh, flame belch cooldown, grenades, ice grenade cooldowns, and finally the right weapons and mods that you're going to need to take down the 20 demons that are currently ready to fuck your day up. I do want to give some credit where it's due. id Software did add a pretty comprehensive tutorial to teach you the basics of Doom Eternal. The tutorial gives you a decent enough feel for the mechanics, but nowhere near enough what you need to not get the shit slapped out of you. I really do enjoy the way that id Software introduces all these mechanics in the base game. With each mechanic comes maybe 1 or 2 arenas for you to screw around in and get the hang of each mechanic. A prime example, the dash and the blood punch in Exultia. These 2 mechanics are explored perfectly in the arenas that follow their introductions. When the blood punch is acquired, you receive a short tutorial and are lowered in an elevator, greeting 3 zombies. Instinctively, you should be mashing that brand new panic button and smashing those heads in. Later, when Doom introduces the dash, they immediately put you in an arena where the floor is electrified, so your best/only maneuver here is to dash to make your way across the other platforms. Perfect incorporation. Now, let's look at the dash tutorial for the Ancient Gods. Does it feel like something's missing? Without the context of an arena fight, players won't be instinctively dashing or blood punching effectively, and that's going to stop them from truly enjoying what the game has to offer. I also wanted to quickly bring up the codex tutorials. If you read all of them, the mechanics are explained quickly and pretty effectively, but I still have 2 problems with this. The minor problem being that the average player is just going to want to jump into the experience and likely won't read all of it, if any, of the codex. And I will concede that this is 100% the player's fault, so that's why it's really only a minor problem. Although it does tie in with a sensory overload theme, and my main problem. Do you notice how much shit there is to read and memorize? Again, all this goes back to the context of arena fights. The base game is supposed to teach you how to use and master these mechanics, but if a player buys the DLC standalone, they have to instantly learn and memorize all this stuff, or just straight up not have a good time. Doom Eternal is at its best when it pressures you to use all your tools to solve the combat puzzle, but if you don't know what tools you have at your disposal, then the puzzle feels unfair. These mechanics are introduced seamlessly in the base game, but to a new player, things are going to seem overwhelming and potentially off-putting. The Ancient Gods was made as a challenge for players who mastered the original combat loop that id provided in Doom Eternal. It feels like kind of an oxymoron then to allow first-time players to waltz in and play this expansion. It would be like selling the original Doom and then instead of releasing the Ultimate Doom, they just released Die Flesh Consumed as a standalone game. I think Hugo Martin put it best when he mentioned that id Software is okay with annoying the player if they have something to teach them. By the time that you boot up the Ancient Gods, the lessons you took from the base game need to be applied immediately. But if you didn't get those lessons, you're stuck in a position where you have nothing to learn and you're getting annoyed. Granted, the Ancient Gods has its own lessons to teach you, namely the new spirits, the eyeball whiplashes, and the new blood makers, and something of the eyeball turrets, but those are just floating targets on a stick. This point sort of ties back to the sensory overload as well, because now you also have to keep track of the other enemies, all their weak points, and if you look at the DLC this way, selling it as a standalone experience contradicts the philosophy that Doom Eternal is built on, at least the one that Hugo is talking about. So just a little bit more about me, I play all my games on PC, including Doom Eternal. Steam is my platform of choice, and something that I notice quite often, I'd say maybe 5 times a year, Eternal goes on sale for like 67% off. The game actually goes cheaper than the DLC. The reason that this upsets me so much is because people have the option to play the base game, but may be deterred for whatever reason until the game goes off sale. Then because they missed the sale, they'll jump into the Ancient Gods without thinking twice. They get their ass kicked, and now they don't like Doom Eternal as a whole just because of their bad experience. I understand this bit of the argument relies a lot on human error, and the reason I still find it important to bring this up is because, well, how do I put this? All of the customers are human. Making mistakes is something that is super common for people, and just the amount of people in North America alone increases the probability of this mistake tenfold. Doom Eternal is my favorite game of 2020. I have never had more fun in a shooter ever. The Ancient Gods expanded on the core mechanics and have made me love the game even more. If I played them in reverse order, I don't think I would love this game as much as I do. Doom Eternal perfectly paces itself and amazingly transitions into the Ancient Gods. Playing them in reverse order is like watching a movie scenes backwards and trying to enjoy it. id Software also stands to make way more money if they required the player to own the base game instead of making the DLC standalone. Not just because of the added requirement that forces players to pay for the base game, but because players will experience the fantastic base game and will be craving more after the fact. The Ancient Gods isn't for beginners and shouldn't be presented as the entry point. I love Doom Eternal. I want more people to buy the game, and I recommend this game to everyone. Although, because of the reasons that I mentioned, I think new players should avoid the standalone Ancient Gods DLC like the plague. I think id Software made a huge mistake releasing the Ancient Gods Part 1 as a standalone product, and if you want to introduce your friends to Doom, try getting them to play your copy. Introduce them to Doom 2016, that game is fantastic too. If you want people to get into this game, get them into the game. Don't throw them into the deep end and expect them to have a good time. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Hi, thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to see more of me, consider subscribing. If you liked what I had to say, drop a like, it really helps out. If you want to see more Doom content, leave it in the comment section below. I'm planning my next video to be either about Sea of Thieves or hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. Please let me know which one you'd rather see next. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.